Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. Now, we are joined by Arwin, trying to get in right in the middle of my introduction, 10th Man, Refracted Curvature, Neil, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Yo, 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 hello.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, hey.
Yay, that's
Good
the level of
afternoon.
enthusiasm I love. Couldn't be more pleased.
Yeah,
Any evidence
I
you can
can-
acquire an elevation angle from a curved baseline?
Nonsense.
There'll never be any.
One cannot acquire an elevation angle from a curved baseline. It must be straight. It must be flat. Earth is flat.
Well, what do you do if you're like standing on a really high hill and it's super misty and you can really only see the curved hill around you and you still want to use the sextant, or you have to?
If the curved hill
What
that
do you
you're
do
talking
then?
about is a horizon, then you can still use that. If you've got an item in the sky to measure to and you've got a horizon of any description, that horizon can be used. Now, if you're saying that you've got a topographical horizon as opposed to a horizon in the distance, i.e. there's just something like a wall right close to you, well, that isn't a horizon. That's just a limitation, a literal limitation to your view. Well, no, in that case, you'd have to crack out your artificial horizon or your bubble sextant. That's if you could see something. You said it was foggy. Well,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
how are you going to see the star or the sun or whatever it is you're measuring in the sky if that's the case?
Well, maybe if it's foggy more close to the ground, but right above you, you can still see some clear sky and stars and all that.
Yeah, that's going to be the way they would do it at sea, right? 10th, that's basically what you've got to do. Wait till you can.
Well, yeah, if you can't see the stars, fold it up, wait for a better time. If you can't see the horizon, fold it up, wait for a better time. That's pretty much it. That's why they don't use the bubble sextant or the artificial horizon at sea, is because the ships are also tossing and turning. So you've got to have those good days to be able to do it. I've read where they've gone weeks without seeing anything, and they've kept close record of their dead reckoning and start all over again.
Man,
Okay.
so you really don't want to get stuck in a giant storm for like a week in the middle
Correct.
of the ocean.
Correct.
Because you can't navigate either. That sucks.
I think
No,
that's
you just start all over again. That's all.
well, it's just generally
But you
bad
might
news all
still
round,
use
right?
GPS or something.
Being in a storm at sea is just generally bad news all round. You don't want it, or in the air for that matter.
That's correct.
Well,
Any
it's-
evidence?
When you, hang on. No, basically, there's different methods. There's a Mark St. Hilaire method. There's all these different, the Sumner method, which is very closely related. But the whole point is your first guess is where you think you are. You don't even, but you're going to be close within the 50 miles, 100 miles even, some of them say. And you're okay if you do that. And you get that from dead reckoning. And you do it by other means, as you know, listen to book, from your log and so forth. And so let's say there's a storm for a week. Now you've been tossed and turned around. But what you've been doing all along is saying, okay, here's the compass. Here's what it's saying each day. Every half hour we pull it out. And then here's our drift. And they throw through the rope out there with the knots in it to figure how fast they were going. They had a big old egg timer to figure out the time with the knots speed. And, you know, these were all antiquated things in antiquity that they were doing, because if they got a storm like Arwin said for a week, they got to start all over again. So now they got to guess where they are. And then when they start going to the tables and then they do the longitude with, GMT and the time set to the Greenwich and their sun at noon versus Greenwich sun at noon. Oh, okay. So we're off by this much based on where we thought we were to where we actually are. Then make corrections and they go again.
Any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
None whatsoever. You'd see drift. This is a very important, very simple, very overlooked part of their lie. Because if the Earth is turning, the Earth is turning. Okay, none of us feel it. Yeah, but it is. You've been in a car, right, with the windows up. You don't feel it. I go, no, I feel it. I feel the tires on the road. Well, how about the plane? Yeah, I feel it. Turbulence in the sky. Okay, but almost you don't feel it, right? I go, no, I always feel it. Okay, well, just assume you don't feel it. I go, how can I assume I don't feel it when I feel it? I mean, they just lie to themselves. If the Earth is turning and you get up in a hot air balloon, the Earth should be turning underneath you, as Neil deGrasse Tyson says it does for a football.
The claim that we have an axis to have rotation is a violation of the celestial sphere model.
I hate it when you get right to the point.
Who was that? Go ahead, whoever that was.
I just said yes, it is.
You take all the fun out of it, John, Nathan.
Yeah, well, he used to do it to me every day for about a month. I'd be like launching into, well, if you've got a single reference frame, you've not got any drift to account for. And if you've got two reference frame, you've got Charlotte, North Carolina to LA only taking an hour and a half. So therefore, the Earth's not turning underneath. And when they tell us that the Earth wouldn't be expected to be seen turning underneath, then they've got no drift. Then John would open his line and go, having an axis of rotation violates the celestial sphere model. Well, that puts an end to that conversation now, doesn't it?
Well, he says I object first.
Maybe he's been watching the Johnny Depp trial with us.
Objection, Your Honor.
I see so many parallels in courtrooms. I realise the evidential standard's very different here, but in terms of the way we operate, it's very similar to a courtroom setting in many instances. You know, our tolerance is very low and our standards are very high. Go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, Nathan, I've heard the Johnny Depp trial is pretty exciting.
Pretty exciting.
Heard.
Boom, boom.
Oh, no, but that's why it is fascinating, because you can see like the similarities.
Obviously, there's things that don't parallel also, but yeah.
No, but what parallels is two sides with a different story. Which one you got to vet out is the true one, right?
Basically,
that's like us, right? We're saying on the housekeeping questions, like the one we just asked, and then they'll come in and say something, and then now it's time to drill down deep and see what words and definitions don't mean anything, they say. Well, why? Because we're drilling down to see what each word you just used in defense of your lie meant or didn't mean, or what you tried to do. They just run scared. That's why you have to drill down on everything everyone is saying in this type of arena, because when we say elevation angle, we mean one thing. And when they say elevation angle, they mean from the center of the Earth.
Indeed. And when they oppose the argument, they are allowed to lie. As much as they can be impeached on their lies or their contradictions, they can lie. There's nothing physically stopping them from doing so, and they often do. They just get caught out on their lies, which is the same as here. You know, you get the opportunity to parrot out your nonsense, and when it gets pulled apart, normally that's where the interruptions and obfuscation and the dissemination into chaos begins from our opponent who's being proven wrong. Now that is definitely not paralleled. That would be put a stop to. Other than that, yeah, the standards, yes, they're different. Yes, we tend to focus on physics. But they're looking for an explanation and then a response to pull apart the explanation and the inconsistencies being highlighted along that journey. Regardless of how truthful each party may think their information is at the time, when it's pulled apart by an opponent, you see the flaws in the logic and flaws in the argument. Exactly the same as here.
Yeah, but look at even yesterday with that Kent Wheeler thing, not to bring it up again, but all of that nonsense he put forth. the way it was broken down word by word, you saw how silly it sounded.
Yeah, but if you're talking to the uninitiated, convoluted word salad can sound really, really convincing. And then if you only focus on one aspect of your word salad, in that case we had capacitance and permeability, and then that's connected to the unknown fabric of the world, something like that, was the description of ether. So if you hear that and you're like, well, I know what capacitance is, and then that gets focused on, you're like, well, you're just talking about that. You're not talking about ether. You're now just talking about electricity rather than ether. But because it's part of the overall description in the word salad, unless you pull apart each and every word that's being used by, in that instance, Ken Wheeler, to define what ether actually is, you can't get to the bottom of what that string of word salad means and how it's nonsense, contradictions in most instances. Like literally the one word that follows the next contradicts the previous.
Yep.
I'll give you an example. Longitude and latitude. To the glober, that means something on the ball, a sphere. To maps, it's grid lines.
How are they measured? But how are they acquired? Shane Bryant's not here.
Well, elevation angles to Polaris is where they got it. I mean, this is written down because if you're above the equator part of that longitude latitude, you're in the northern, as they call. And if you're below it, you're in the southern, as they call. And an elevation angle to Polaris, if you're right under it, well, you're 90 degrees to it. It's right above you. And as you move towards that equator line, it goes to zero. And so you'll know exactly. This was prior to them figuring out time at sea with the chronometer. They could always get their latitude because all you had to do was take a sextant, shoot Polaris in the sky. And if you were at 40 or 50 or 60, you knew exactly where you were in relationship to the zero equator line. And so that's how they did it. And they will just go to that line and cross and sail east-west.
Yep.
Until they figured out longitude.
Again, I've said this more than once in the last month, which is shocking for my family household, but there we go. My wife very, very rarely shows any interest, given that I've been doing it for over 7 years now. But again, she overheard particular parts of the discussion in regards to the globe being a flat Earth model. And for whatever reason, that perked her interest. And she's like, well, what do you mean? So I explained to her elevation angle measurements to Polaris. And just by luck or whatever you want to call it, we've got a Mercator projection on the floor as a rug. So I showed her. I was like, well, this is how you, as you move around Polaris in a circle, all of the angles would be the same to it. And then when you back away 60 nautical miles, it'll drop towards the horizon 1 degree. Well, that you can use in a circle as it's seen and measured, but you can just straighten out that line and stick it on a map. Well, there's your line. But does that mean that the line represents a line that could be curled back up onto a sphere? Because that's what they're claiming. But then you can't get that angle that gave you the line in the first place. Now, the line on a square map isn't a line, it's a circle. It's a circle around Polaris that gives you an angle to it. 1 degree drop towards the horizon for every 60 nautical miles you back away from it. I.e., off a flat Earth, if you measure the angle to that star as you move away from it, it'll drop towards the horizon. But the measurement tool is an angle measuring tool. So from the flat baseline to the star, backing away from it and measuring it again, dropping towards the horizon, is a flat Earth measurement. You're measuring a baseline and an altitude angle.
It can only be done on a flat plane. Correct.
Not only can it has been done and has been used to develop the models and the maps. That is what's being used present tense.
Correct.
So there's no getting away from it, basically. Otherwise, they would have got away from it already. I mean, they've had a couple of 100 years, I would suggest, to figure this stuff out and move it away from the actual elevation angle measurements off a flat plane, and they haven't. They've given us GPS, So I suppose on the surface level you can say, well, it's global positioning system. Yeah, but it's using Cartesian coordinates. So it's still using the same exact principles the original maps use. They're still devised from flat Earth elevation angle measurements. And it's still using length, breadth and depth in a grid on a flat surface. So people have got a misapprehension about the mere title of things when you've got global in the word, that somehow that automatically means it's falling in a presuppositional orbit around a sphere Earth. It's like, no, nothing could be further from the truth, I'm afraid. Not only are the means of delivery probably being lied about by a huge extent, because they're saying these satellites, in quotes, are in space, a sky vacuum. Shout out to California Condor, who says the only thing on our flat Earth are lines of longitude. Well, no, sorry to be contradictory. Thank you very much, first and foremost, for the super chat. They're conceptual, like the equator. Yeah, you can measure. You can measure an angle to Polaris from any point and then move around it in a circle and see that you get the same angle on the land that you're standing. But that's an imaginary line. Just like the midpoint for the sun between the seasons can be called the equator when it's averaged. But there is no equator.
Nathan, you hit it right in the head when you said that's how they trick you, by putting the word global and satellites and all these things. That's how they keep the magic trick going.
Any evidence of the sky vacuum? That would be the notion that we can have gas pressure that we're all breathing without a container.
Ridiculous. If outer space was a place that men could travel to, then so would the gas.
Very well put. Any scientific evidence of gravity?
What's
No sign. We waited.
What's gravity? Well, gravity is the current gravity, I should say, is the bending of a fourth dimensional space-time caused by the uneven distribution of mass.
They'll throw little tricks at you, like glue yourself to a scale and go into hover or something, and you'll see no weight on the scale. They'll throw little tricks like that at you, which don't prove anything.
Yeah, meanwhile, gas expands in all directions. It's very much a state of matter that we experience. Gas doesn't go down, go boom, boom at 9.8 meters per second.
That's again another clue. The behavior of gas, as you just explained, everyone knows that. With a simple research, you can find out yourself. And yet they try to say something else. Same is true about an elevation angle. Everyone can do a little research and realize you need two lines to get an angle, a vertex. But then they'll twist it around like they do the gas. Everything is working on the flat plane exactly the way it is. And then they have to say, well, we need a flat surface. Where can we get one? Where can we get one? Oh, let's cut the Earth in half and say all the measurements come from that flat disk at the middle. And then we'll say sunlight comes in parallel so that we can have a corresponding angle when we draw that straight line that isn't there on the circle, but we need it in order to say it's corresponding. But then the sunlight has to be parallel. So, well, yeah, but it's divergent. No, I know, but don't worry, we can change that. We'll see.
Yeah. I think it was Phil B that said, where does it say in the second law of thermodynamics or natural law that you need containment for gas pressure?
Fine, standard gas law, it's the V, isn't it? Volume.
The volume.
Yeah, Phil normally does that in my chat, and then he'll say, how do you explain how we've got whatever, I don't know the exact value, but at a given altitude, I'll ask why we have certain PSI of pressure up there. And you're like, what's the I? Per inch, right? Per square inch of surface area to press on. So without a container, you've got no I in PSI. So you say, oh, we've already got gas pressure pointing at the sky, appealing to it being a vacuum and us just having pressure anyway. It's like, well, you're going to qualify the pressure in a means that requires containment to qualify it. The amount of volume, and in the case of PSI, the amount of area the gas can press on in its container.
Yeah, it has to be contained.
Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
Well, if there is, they never show us the process.
Wouldn't Michio Kaku be the one to ask about that?
Yes and no. I'll say yes just to lead you where you're going. Yes, I'm sure he would, as an astrophysicist. Theoretical physicist, correction.
Well, he says no one in my field uses the scientific method.
No, I think he said understand uses.
Yeah, they've got plenty of phenomena to study, but that's about it. Go on, whoever that was from Discord.
I'm just saying it's guesswork.
Leaps of logic.
Seat of your pants.
Speaking of guesswork, any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth? Dun 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 dun.
Now listen, the people that do celestial navigation should know, right? Because they cut the Earth in half, so we should ask them what's in the center.
Yeah, there is no centre. That violates the celestial sphere model. Any evidence of the distance to the Sun?
Any evidence of what the sun is?
I've heard people say it's 93 million miles away.
Sorry, they say it's that distance, but then when they talk about celestial navigation after the acquisition of a flat Earth elevation angle, they also talk about projecting it out to an infinite distance because it's very awkward having them at set distances that are different. If you're going to be measuring, well, I'll rephrase that. If you're going to be utilising flat Earth elevation angles in your claim to be sphere calculations, then you set them at an infinite distance. Obviously, I mean, the entire process is invalidated by the fact that you're measuring a flat Earth in the first place, but that is in fact what they do. Infinite distance. As opposed to the model and its set distances, I mean, that being a massive problem if you're going to claim that you've got your elevation angle from a flat Earth and then you're going to use it on a sphere, you better set them all to the same distance, right?
Well, if it's at an infinite distance, why is it casting divergent rays?
We have no idea.
You're
What the
going to need a
distance is.
radius for that.
Well, they're going to need a radius for their claim distances because they use R and Kepler's third law of interplanetary motion, but they give them scaling values after presuppositions of R values and orbital motion. All of those presuppositions violate the celestial sphere model and require a flat Earth to measure the elevation angle to Polaris. So
I got my hand up. For a question.
For the radius as well.
Where did they get R?
Hold on. Let's ask the question. Any evidence of the R value, Earth radius? Go ahead, 10th.
Thank you. Yeah, where did they get R? How did they measure R? I mean, Al-Biruni is given credit, and he didn't even know anything about refraction, never used it when he measured the mountain first flat and then get on the mountain to do a dip to the horizon. So, I mean, there's so many holes in that story. Actually, the whole process helps us and destroys them.
Yeah, he needed the Earth to be flat in order to measure a radius.
Yes, that's correct. You're going to need a flat Earth for that. Speaking of which, I'm going to do a quick plug for a show that's out for members only at the moment, which is called Jackanory Globe. And it's a edited down section of yesterday's live show where John and I give our little renditions in story time format, Jackanory, hence the title, about Aristophanes and Al-Biruni's acquisition of angles from a flat Earth, we also go into the sky vacuum, because I think that's a reasonable summary of the current situation. The sky is not a vacuum. If it was, we wouldn't be breathing. We'd have no gas. Gas expands in all directions. Therefore, the sky vacuum and space, including all travel to it, are a violation of natural law. They never happened. They never will happen. All those stories from that claim to be fake region of a sky vacuum known as space are debunked by the second law of thermodynamics. Gas fills space. Further to that, all models and claims of a sphere Earth have been derived from flat Earth elevation angle measurements. And then, here's the stories of your version of how you measured your claim to be sphere Earth using flat Earth to do so. That's the concise summary of the argument for flat Earth to date. That's it, in that video. So if you want to see, when it comes out at the weekend, if you're a non-member, the summary of where flat Earth debate is at currently in 2022, then this is it. You can't get a globe model unless you use a flat Earth to measure it, and the sky is not a vacuum. Jackanory Globe, check it out when it comes out at the weekend. Or if you're a member, check it out now. Or if you're not a member, become a member. Smash the super chat. I think that concludes housekeeping. I think we asked everything.
Did you do molten iron core?
I did.
Okay. I
Slipped
missed
it in with a little clown music. Any word on Phil and John?
What
I'll
about
take
that.
the viable
Yeah.
hypothesis?
Sorry, I had viable hypothesis.
I stepped away for a second. I heard Phil and John. I'm sorry.
Yeah, any update?
No, I actually didn't get on Discord yesterday, but I will today.
Okie dokie. Well, we'll see. Maybe something will come of it. Maybe it won't. Who knows? Who's it that said viable hypothesis? What were you referring to?
Sorry. Any viable? Did we ask the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics
We did,
having a
that's-
viable hypothesis?
We did. That's how we got into Michio Kaku. Did you have something to add on that in that regard?
Just to say they do not have a viable hypothesis. They have plenty of natural phenomenon, but you can't vary and manipulate them.
Right on. It's something that I hope when Bullbusters starts rolling again, because QE's had a load of computer issues, as am I at the moment, I'll be honest. We'll focus on that again. You know, I'm going to suggest that to QE. But we need to focus on that again. Not enough of the community after 4 years of us banging it home bi-weekly on Bullbusters for a significant period. Many of the people haven't picked up on it, don't understand it, and still claim science utilisation of the same magic trick we were deceived with. And it's kind of sad, really. You know, we should have progressed beyond that 4 years ago. A roadblock was put up. Let's not get into that in too much detail, but nevertheless, the other arguments have definitely made their way into the community. But not the scientific understanding that's required to know how you were deceived in the first place, and to prevent you being deceived further in future, not just by globe Earth and flat Earth, but by, notice I mentioned flat Earth in there, but by anything that's claiming to be science, and it's rife. Shout out to Tabor J. Eaton. What about this Antarctica crossing? Some YouTube captain. How do you think they will fake it? I don't know what they want to fake or why they would fake it in that way, because I don't know a great deal about Antarctica. I've got a singular first-hand account from Robert Shortman about his experience of what he called Antarctica. Now, I'm in no doubt that he did go to Antarctica, but what is it in relation to where anybody else goes? Because they're very much separated in terms of who owns what, even if you consider it as an island at the bottom of a sphere. So it's shrouded in mystery, and to me, if I'm ruthlessly honest, as much as it doesn't answer your question and kind of diverts your question, it seems like a magic trick. You wave one hand in the air, and while your audience is looking at that hand, you're doing something with the other. And Antarctica feels like the hand being waved. Don't look over here. No, there's nothing to see over here. That's a hand being waved. So, I don't know. It's a hard one to answer because it's shrouded in mystery, I feel, intentionally. Shout out to Chris Berry, who's become a member. Do not watch Moonfall. Your head may explode. Okay, maybe. Thanks for joining as a member.
Hey, listen, it's important that you get back to the scientific method and break it down once again. That way you won't have claims of real scientists and claims of the children of Israel being led out of Egypt, a natural observed phenomenon. I mean, we really got to get into it again.
I agree. Understanding what science is something that it shouldn't be too difficult to understand or take back on board because you were told it in school. We all were, for the reason of its power later in life. So if you understand at a fundamental level because you were taught it at an age where you were an information sponge, that science is an empirical method, it proves things. And if you can show how that method, logically speaking, is going to offer proof if performed correctly, that'll stay with you. And then in later life, when you're told by a quote-unquote scientist that he's right whether you like it or not, you'll accept it. The magic trick is complete. It's also...
As you're taught.
Go on.
I was just going to say you're taught what to think in school, not really how to think in the lower levels of school.
Yeah, indeed. This is what you will think. Understand it. And let's never
that's what
speak of it again.
Nathan's saying.
Go on.
Sorry, I was going to say that's what you're saying. And when you get older, you know that science means empiricism. Yes, he's right, whatever he says.
But you don't know that. You believe that because someone told you. And really, until I entered into this discussion, I just believed it offered empiricism. You know, I didn't understand the logic behind it or the reason behind it.
Chris Berry says, member for 19 months, Nathan. Yes, thank you very much for joining for such an extended period. Also, shout out to Godzilla, who joined for a 17-month period. Lots of people confident that I'll be around for a long time. I'm as confident as you. I was going to go into Phil Bell, as we were talking about him specifically. So a couple of times he's let slip his real fears and anxieties in this regard, which is to say that up until now, Professor Phil Bell has been rewarded with the respect in that notion that what he says as a man of science is to be understood and accepted as fact. Well, we threaten that in the most overt manner.
You would think he wouldn't say things or back people when they say things like water vapor isn't a gas.
That's just a gaff.
More...
To be honest, as much as you can poke fun at people for that, it's just a gaff. And everyone makes a gaff. He's caught up in the moment. That doesn't concern me. What does is when he lets slip his motivations for being here. His motivations are fear-based. No two ways about this in my mind based on what he says in our chats. He's concerned about his legacy being forgotten because what he has learned and what he has taught is being challenged by us, shown to be not as true, and therefore that threatens his power. Currently, he's quite an old guy, so he won't be around forever, but at the moment, while he is, his power is to say, I am a professor, so what I say stands. Respect my authority in that regard. And when he comes here, that's immediately evaporated. So therefore, if it's only evaporated here, and only here, that's okay for him, because it doesn't disseminate its way out throughout the Western world, dissolving his authority as it goes. So he needs to put a lid on it, because he's scared of losing his authority and power and position. and the respect that he gained from people just by saying he was a professor.
Well, that's the one common denominator that I'm seeing from cross-section of people I've talked to on the subject, is that when they're heavily invested, they argue harder against the points that we're making. In fact, to the point where they don't want to talk to you anymore. Whereas the people who aren't or have anything invested are very open and find it quite interesting.
So, Jean has a question, says via Super Chat, check out, quote, Rahu dash the Black Sun, end quote, by A Plain Truth 14. It's a technical breakdown on Black Sun. Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed for the Super Chat.
What does it say about somebody when either they use their credentials as a means of argument or they attack your lack of credentials because of the argument? What does it say about the strength of your argument? Either way.
Well, in and of itself, it's a fallacy. It's an ad hominem attack if they attack you based on your credentials rather than your argument.
So what does it say when they say, well, I have these credentials, that's why this argument is sound?
It's a fallacy.
Or something to that effect.
It's a flaw in their logic. It's a flawed position.
Right. Because you can have all the credentials in the world and can be completely wrong, or you can have no credentials and be completely right. It doesn't matter. Credentials don't mean anything.
Indeed. Hi, Adam.
Then, guys.
Well, on the flip side of that, Paul, wouldn't that mean that to assert that it means something for them to use that argument is also fallacious?
Well, what he's really saying is, I have all this knowledge and you don't, but that doesn't mean anything. So I don't care. You can know everything in the world and still be wrong. You know what I mean? I don't know. I know what you're saying, though.
In the behavioural panel analysis of people, they call it a resume statement. Normally, when you're not very confident about what you're saying or you're lying, you'll rattle off your credentials as a justification for the statement being true. So they call it, by behavioural analysis standards, a resume statement.
I've never heard that before. That's pretty good. I like that.
Just check out the behavioural panel, man. You'll love it. I mean, I watch a fair few different, or have over the years, dipped in and out of various different behavioural experts, and I find myself disagreeing as much as I agree with some of their analyses. Not that I'm a behavioural expert, but I just think, no, I don't necessarily agree with your interpretation of that. But when it's four of them, which it is in this instance, it makes it completely unique in terms of how they pull apart, and they disagree with each other like we do. You know, they're not always in agreement with one another. Most of the time they are, I'll admit that. But fascinating to watch them pull apart some of the things that they look at. Skirting away from the behavioural panel just for a second, if you check out that channel, it's a YouTube channel in case anybody hadn't picked up on that. Four guys that watch, they're watching Amber Heard and Johnny Depp at the moment in terms of they're pulling apart the body language of both Amber Heard reacting to Johnny Depp's witnesses in their last video, and indeed Johnny Depp's body language. They also did it for the case that was in the UK in 2020. So they've analysed that. There's my segue back over to Johnny Depp. One of the things I wanted to talk about, because Adam's joined, was the two different, let's call them for the sake of this discussion, scientists, Adam, that have gone on the stand both in defence of Johnny Depp in assessment of Amber Heard and in favour of Amber Heard in assessment of Amber Heard. Have you seen those two individuals take the stand in that particular instance, Adam?
No, I've not caught that, but I'll have to take scientists, you say?
Indeed, scientists, yes.
Behavioural scientists.
Correct, yes.
Which is a posh way of saying psychology, having to admit that it's a humanity, not a science.
Correct. So one of them was, I can't remember if she's called Doctor, perhaps it's Doctor, I forget the title, but Curry is her second name. And when she was under cross-examination, she made it plain that upon running her tests that she presents science. and only the information that the science has alluded to. And when she said it with, looking over her spectacles in a very professional manner. She was excellent, actually. I can't deny she was a fantastic witness, unlike the doctor that's been put on the stump for Amber Heard, who's pretty awful. But there we go, that's just my opinion. As she said it, there was what's the word? A hush that came over the entire courtroom as she said it. It was so powerful. And total nonsense. She's a quack. She's a pseudoscientist. There is not one shred of there is not one shred of science that psychologist will ever present you ever. Your little ticking boxes aren't science. Let's get that plain. Now, I'm not demeaning this entire field. I understand that there is some excellent research and analysis gone into human behaviour. I'm not going to deny that. One of the things I studied before this very subject was psychopathy. There we go, I'll get there in the end. Which was a fascinating subject for me to just look into. And that's all in that field. But it definitely isn't science. But the moment that very well credited, very believable woman stated that what she presented to the court on behalf of the court, even though she was being paid by the plaintiff, was science, as I say, a hush came over the entire courtroom because they believed her. Because what she said was empirical, therefore. That's what she stated.
I have an A-level in psychology. So I got rid of physics, got on my nerves, and picked that up. And fundamentally, the first thing they're saying, because I'm a science boy, I'm doing chemistry, I'm doing maths and the likes, and we're going into this. So is they set the stall that it's not. This isn't science you're about to do now. We're not going to be. It wants to be science. It wants to have that status that it's a science. But as I said, it's a humanity, and everything they try to do will try and use empiricism. They'll try and use that to validate all the conclusions. But the first thing you learn in this is we're never going to get to a cause and effect. We're dealing with the workings of the mind, okay, and therefore there is no direct cause and effect. It's all, and this is how you analyze everything in psychology. It's all probabilities. It's all correlation based. So there is no science because every relationship that you draw between two parameters is always a correlation. There's never any science in linking the two. It's always just statistical.
The trick is to spark that part of your brain that you had when I described you as an information sponge, member of the audience I'm referring to, when you were in 5th grade and they told you about the scientific method, cause and effect relationships, independent variable and dependent variable, varying something to cause something, the empirical method of science. So when that particular, I don't want to demean it because I don't think, as I said earlier, I think I've qualified this enough to say that I'm not intentionally trying to demean what she said or presented, merely the attribution of scientific validity to studies of human behaviour. And as Adam's already described, and I've already described, that simply isn't the case. But it is an extremely effective utilisation of the magic trick. I say science, you hear proven. Excellent use of the trick. But when I heard it, I had a little smile to myself. It's like, yeah, that came across well, love. Yeah, you really did hammer the empiricism of your completely non-empirical method home there, didn't you, love? Good job, good job. Yeah, because everyone in the audience, aka jury, hears that and goes, science, impressive. Yeah, it didn't mean anything. They did it. Did she establish a phenomena and then wonder what caused it and varied the cause that she presumed would cause it, see if it caused it? No. She ticked a few boxes. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to demean those boxes. Those tests have been very well honed. They're very well polished. Just not empirical. Not science.
And the problem with psychology to begin with, too, sorry, I'm picking some sausage, is you can't do the scientific method truly because you run into ethical and moral implications. So to understand how maybe depravity affects the psyche, I mean, you would have to deprive a child or a person of certain things. That's why the atrocities of the Holocaust is so bad. That's why the Nuremberg trial came into the Nuremberg Code came into play. There are certain things you cannot do, even within the psychology, to prove or disprove your theory, because you're going to have to inflict pain or suffering on someone to accomplish that, and that will never happen. Well, it may happen if the person's evil, but you can't do it. So true science can never be done on psychology. Truly.
Shout out to Godzilla37 who says, support what you like or it goes away. Wait, I don't support Tim, yet he's still here. Might have to reword this. Thank you very much indeed for your support, Godzilla. Really appreciate it.
To speak to that again, science is cause and effect. Humans don't all react the same. And this is the thing, it's the study of human behavior that you can't have a cause and effect. You can have a probability of how somebody's likely to, but it's not an on-off switch. Not every human behaves exactly the same in the similar circumstances. So by the very definition of what you're analysing, it can't be science, because we're not trying to elucidate a cause and effect relationship here.
So let's establish what a cause is and what an effect is. Well, an effect is your step one in the scientific method. That would be the observation of a naturally occurring phenomena, something that happens in nature. Well, what makes it a phenomena in science? Well, first and foremost, it's your dependent variable in your hypothesis. That thing that you saw happening, that's your dependent variable. Now, it's not a dependent variable, aka observed phenomena, until you actually observe it happening. So, to be a dependent variable in a scientific prediction, aka hypothesis, first it must actually happen and you must witness it actually happening. Ergo, it can't be something that happened in the past that you postulate a cause for, as will be made clear later in the method. So an effect is something that you observe in nature happening. If it's not doing anything, it's not an effect. A tree isn't an effect, it's a concrete noun, it doesn't do anything. Leaf falling from tree, that's a natural phenomena that you can study the cause of. So that's a dependent variable, aka effect. Well, once you've got something occurring in nature, an effect, a dependent variable, that's half of a hypothesis. You're halfway there to a scientific prediction already just by seeing something happen and saying what it is. Leaf falling from a tree. So, what do you do with it? Well, you say, I wonder what causes it. That's your question when they bastardise the method and describe it in Science Buddies as step one being ask a question. No, the question you ask is in regards to your dependent variable, aka the phenomena you want to know the cause of. So the question is, what caused that? And the way you establish what causes it is you suppose what might cause it. I think this caused that. Well, then you've got both halves of a scientific prediction. That's a hypothesis. Your independent variable, that would be your cause that you assume will make the effect happen. So what makes an independent variable an independent variable? Well, first and foremost, it's got to be real, a bit like the dependent variable. Second of all, it is, in your hypothesis at least, your independent variable. And third, it must be capable of being varied and manipulated by you, the researcher. So not anything in Fantasyland or things that are gravity that can't be controlled or manipulated by you. They've got to be an actual thing that you can physically vary. So that's it. You've got a full two-step process established in a three-step method. Step 1, observe something happening. Step 2, formulate a hypothesis. Well, that's your independent variable, presumed cause of the effect, and your dependent variable, effect you're trying to figure out the cause of. If A, independent variable, then B, dependent variable. That's a hypothesis. Also known as an alternative hypothesis because there is another side to it, which is the null. Which is if A, what you vary physically to see if it causes your effect, then not B, it does not cause the effect. That's known as a null hypothesis. And this independent variable, dependent variable cause and effect relationship, otherwise known as a scientific prediction, aka hypothesis, is yet to be validated. So don't mistake this prediction, scientific prediction hypothesis, as an explanation. If A, then B, or if A, not B, well, you've got to figure out which one is which. Does it cause it or doesn't it? Well, that's an experiment, step 3 in the method. Vary A and see if it causes B. If you vary A, your presumed cause of the effect, and it causes the effect, then you validate your alternative hypothesis. A causes B. Tick. As soon as you tick your alternative, you have to put a line through your null. Because A can't both cause B and not cause B at the same time. It violates the law of non-contradiction. A can't both be the cause.
And stuff on my laptop here and all that. Boy, don't come in here jumping around, please. Max, what are you doing?
You want to go on mute,
cords?
please?
I was at the end of it anyway, so yeah, that's it. You validate your experimentation by varying A, see if it causes B, and if it does, you validate your alternative. If it doesn't, that would be to say you vary A and nothing happens, the effect you want to see happening doesn't, then you validate your null. You put a tick next to if A, that's your varying A, your presumed cause, then not B, the effect you're studying. Well, you varied it, it didn't cause it, so you put a tick next to your null and a line through your alternative. So therefore, you have proven either your null or your alternative. One or other will be proven. That's why it's empirical. Now, that utilization of that method is what gives you the empiricism if you observe a phenomena, formulate a hypothesis, and perform a valid experiment. That's science. So when you talk about tick boxes and psychology and hair products and tyres and anything else that's claimed to have science, wrong. Unless they've observed a phenomena in nature, varied and manipulated something to see if it causes it and caused it, then it's not science.
A lot of people will say that's too narrow.
Yeah, if you want empiricism, you better damn well be under the understanding that the methodology is going to be narrow and very hyper-specific. Not only in the methodology, but in the actual words and definitions of what you are doing. Hyper-specific, hyper-narrow. Yeah, empiricism doesn't come cheap.
Hey, you guys. Good morning.
Morning.
I wanted to change gears a little bit. I want to introduce John 817. He has a question.
Go ahead, John.
On Discord.
It's Gene. Y'all
Gene.
saying John though. Y'all love saying Gene. Well, you know, first thing first, camo hat engaged. Also, I had a question just for you guys. My brother always tells me about this. I'm a flat earther myself, but my brother always tells me, what about those incense at the mall that the smoke like rolls downhill?
What? What about the entrance at the mall where the smoke rolls downhill?
No, the incense, the little incense they sell, you know.
Incense? I don't know what you're talking about. Anybody know what this guy's referring to? We don't have that here in England, as far as I'm aware.
You guys don't have smell good incense?
Yeah, it's
gas is going down, going boom, boom. That's what they're saying.
Sorry, this is all very unfamiliar to me. Don't you all guys smell of piss like we do?
Slightly.
Leave my prostate out.
Smells of urine for sure.
Okay, I don't know what your example is, but feel free. I don't know how to answer it because I don't know what you mean. Can
Is he talking about those atomizers?
What? I know what the
just
claim
look up
is.
smoke incense waterfall or some shit in Google. Just look at a little picture of it.
Is smoke
Yeah, right. He's
solid
saying
or
the
gas?
gas falls down.
Or some shit. Smoke.
He's saying gas falls down. That's what he's trying to say.
He's not saying, he's asking.
He's asking how you explain.
I don't want to see how do you explain that?
How do we explain it? How do we explain diffusion?
Is this kind of like the dry ice effect?
Yeah, that sounds like it. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's easy. Down is also all directions. Down
That's terrible.
is part of all directions. Yeah.
That was pretty terrible.
But it seems to
I mean,
go
down
all
is part of all
uniform.
directions.
Okay, you've got a high concentration of gas and you're dumping it into an area. Well, entropy would dictate that given enough time, that gas will diffuse throughout the area that it has to diffuse. However, it's not immediately being presented to a vacuum. So it's not just going to expand out at a high rapid rate because there's stuff already in the air precluding it from doing so. So the diffusion rate is going to be based on how quickly it can disperse through pre-existing particles that preclude it in the air. Now, obviously, there are gaps in those particles, therefore it will eventually diffuse through it. But it doesn't alter the fact that while the process takes place, it's a high concentration being precluded by other gases that are around it.
I think I've got it on screen. I think I'll stop doing it. But yeah, I think that's a... If you look at the top of it, you summarise it perfectly. What you've got is, look, it's channeled. It can only go one way, so it's going down. But if you look, all of it, entropy is occurring at all of all of the phases. So you can see it. Look at the surface of this dense input. It's diffusing off. Look, it's all breaking up. It's only the fact that there's so much in such a little space that it's pooling a bit. But given the opportunity, look, can you see it's all dissipating? But it's only that concentration is so much and being constantly topped up that it appears like that. But it's following natural law there, isn't it? As it goes, look, and it just, you can see even at the bottom, look, it's disappearing out of those concentrated areas.
Where would that be 10 hours from now?
Similar to carbon monoxide poisoning, isn't it? If you've got an input of concentration, it's going to pool around where you're inputting it. It's still going to then dissipate as it will do, but obviously the rate of input is greater than the rate of output, so you get pooling until the equilibrium can be reached. But you can see there coming off the sides, look, this isn't reaching the bottom. Look, up it goes. It's just in such a concentration that it's doing that first. But it's look at it all going up as soon as it's got the opportunity to.
Adam, this reminds me of that video Brian shared in that one part of Africa where there was that area where a heavy gas was floating for a while and then disappeared. Remember that?
Yeah, so that was the methane pit, wasn't it, or something? And
yeah,
or common up. Again, where's it pooling? It's pooling out the leak, the area where it's coming from. So if I'm constantly putting something in an area, and unless the rate of equalization is equal to the rate of input, you'll get pooling.
Well, we get that. We get that here. We have a gas pressure gradient on Earth. And the reason is simple, because the concentration is highest where the gases are produced. And they get less because they're not being produced in midair. So it doesn't really matter which gas you talk about. You're going to have more of it at ground level and then less of it higher up where it's not being produced because it's dissipated.
In relation to this one, though, I mean, the obvious debunk is that that's smoke, which is
gas.
particulate matter. Yeah, not gas. So, I mean, obviously that's why you see such a waterfall effect, because it's smoke, isn't it? It's not gas. This is hot gas full of small bits of solid.
With that, I'll say if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, hit the PayPal link, joined as a member, and all that good stuff. Another massive thank you to today's Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on an after show. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!